Hey, folks, welcome back to the Land Fixer podcast. I am your host, Logan Swanson. Here we talk about things relating to and or about or whatever, but land, always land. Um, as usual, if you're interested in buying or marketing land, selling your own land, check me out at primelandexchange.com. If you're interested in learning all sorts of things about land for free, I've got episodes on my podcast about everything. So scroll through some of the old episodes, landfixerpodcast.com, thelandfixer.com as well. And if you are interested, you're a land investor and you need funding, go to landpartnerfunding.com. And we got an application waiting for you. Really excited to have my guest here today, Kendall LeJeune. Say hi to the folks.
Hey there, how's it going?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Very good,
And
very good.
I am stealing a page out of your book. So I've been on your podcast twice, and both times you formally read my bio, and it is so endearing. And I don't do that for anybody. But for you, I'm going to formally read your bio. Okay.
Thank
Kendall,
you.
yeah. Kendall LeJeune is the host of the Only Land Fans podcast and the founder of Only Land Fans, a community of land flippers, developers, and wholesalers who come together to connect, learn, and make an impact. Kendall is also the founder and CEO of Longhorn Land Partners, a real estate investment company specializing in land development, based in Texas, if you couldn't tell by the Longhorn part of that. An entrepreneur at heart, he is passionate about helping others to carve out their own paths and pursue their dreams. Kendall is sought after consultant in the areas of peak performance, leadership, and artistic direction. We're going to be getting into some of that tonight. A former music educator, he is also an active clinician, adjudicator, and designer for music programs and performance ensembles across the United States. That is something I definitely can't claim. Oh man, Kendall, thanks for being here. At the top, I usually like to have my guests plug anything that they want to get out to the general public. So, how can folks reach out to you? What do you got going on right now?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me on. Super excited. Always a pleasure to chat with you and geek out about the topics that we're going to talk about today. But if someone wants to plug into the Only Land Fans community, we would love to have as many people in our community, make it as rich as possible. It's a free Facebook community. You can get all of the details at onlylandfans.com. We also have a podcast where I interview a seven-figure land flipper, developer, or investor. Every single week, we talk about how they started and scale their businesses and all of the details, the nuts and the bolts on how they run their businesses. We also interview some really cool vendors and other people that make the land industry work and sort of get those wheels turning in our industry. And so it's very cool to bring all of these unique perspectives to the community. And so would just love to have you guys check out our podcast, check out all of the free stuff that we provide. All of that is on onlylandfans.com. We've got free and in-person meetups, we've got virtual meetups, we've got a school community. So anything that you could look for in land is there, and we'd love to have you.
Awesome. Yeah, and I highly recommend the podcast. You actually do a great job of bringing sort of land adjacent people onto your podcast. Whereas a lot of these other sort of land podcasts are just, I don't know, they keep kind of introducing the same sort of person over and over again. It's like this person does land investing and they did this course and all great stories, not taken away from them. But I really like, you had a broker on last week who was kind of giving a high level view of, you know, what does it look like from a broker's opinion who's bought and sold? What was it for? Like 20 million or something that last year was huge.
Yeah, yeah. Last year, I think it was like 20 million in his
Yeah.
career. I think it was like only 3 or 4 years that he's been in farm and ranch land. This is Weston Jenkins, and
Hmm.
he's a multi-generational farm and ranch realtor. And I think he sold something like 130 million dollars in just three years. But it was really cool to get his perspective about how the market's changing and what
Hmm.
he's seeing from sellers and what he's seeing from buyers. And so he dropped a lot of great information on that podcast.
100%. Well, enough about that guy. Let's talk about you. Um, so, from my perspective, in this world of Facebook groups and things of that nature, I kind of saw you come out pretty much overnight with a cohesive structure around your brand. Everything seemed to be so well thought out. And I think because of how good you were at that, like your audience grew very quickly, not only from, how not like consistent you were. You had structure, but also just the quality of information you're putting out on a regular basis. And it's from my perspective, I was super impressed. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like when you were launching Only Land Fans, how much of that was like detailed out and penned down to the nth degree on how you were going to operate this and blow it up as quick as you did?
Yeah, I will say that when I first started, first of all, I am a chronic planner. It's something that I'm trying to like rehab myself from because it's like if I can't see A to Z, like I start like, start getting anxious. But I also am trying to embrace the whole messy action thing, but to a degree, right? So
Hmm.
I did have, I consulted with different mentors that were in different niches in the real estate space, just in terms of, what makes a really successful community, what makes a really successful brand. And I love to study those types of things. So I love studying personal brands. I love studying communities. And also, digging into the community, what type of people make that community up and what are the demands, what do they need? And the reason why I actually started Only Land Fans, it was really it first started as like I just want to get land people together and like learn from someone that's doing it at a really high level. That was ultimately the whole concept. When I first started my land investing journey, I actually came from the house wholesaling industry, and there's tons of information. I mean, like you throw a rock and you hit a house wholesaler, right? And so there's so much information about house wholesaling and houses in general, but there wasn't a ton of stuff about land. I mean, we had, those the pillars of our community that have been around for, several years, decades almost. Those people were there, but the conversation didn't have as many voices as say like the house industry did. And so my goal was I just wanted to sit down with these like high level investors and high level business operators in the land space and say, how did you do it? Like, success leaves crumbs. And so we wanted to definitely kind of dig into what does your business model look like and how do you approach this? And so that was sort of the impetus to the Only Land Fans podcast. And I just wanted to create stuff that I wish that I had when I first started in the land industry. And so started the podcast. And then out of that, I figured, if it's really about the community and I really wanted to get people involved in talking in this conversation, then I need to have some kind of place for them to gather, right? So that's
Hmm.
when I created the Facebook group and started streaming the virtual meetup into the Facebook group, and that started a whole conversation. And we've added tons of different things onto our offering since then, just out of like necessity. Like people are like, "Hey, do you have a in-person meetup?" I'm like, "No, but I'm sure there are plenty of great land meetups in Austin." So I check it out. I'm like, there really is not. So I guess we're gonna do one. And so that's how a lot of those things that sort of encompass the Only Land Fans brand. That's really how a lot of those things came to be. It's like meeting an organic need, and then
Hmm.
just saying, "Hey, let's do it." So to answer your question, yes, there was some strategic planning in terms of, what did I want the brand to kind of feel like to, initially, but then it just sort of grew to fit what the community actually was asking for.
Yeah, I mean that's brilliant. I was lucky enough. I was way less structured when I started, but when I like literally I found out about land investing, decided I was going to do it, and the first thing I did was start a meetup. Because I
Mm.
was in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I was like, I don't see one. I looked around. There was real estate networks for everything else, but there wasn't one for land. So I made a Facebook group and I started inviting people and saying, "Hey, I'm doing a meetup in Dallas." And within a few weeks of me learning about land investing, I had met folks that were really well established, brand new, started learning right next to people. And really, what I found to be the most valuable aspect, and I bet you're experiencing this as well, is when you surround yourself with winners, you start raising the bar a little bit. Um, and just from the fact that I organized that community, just putting it together, I was immediately seen as someone who knew something. And I actively told people I know nothing. I literally just showed up here and I made a Facebook group. I know nothing. You're way past that, luckily, but um, it was compelling enough that like as long as I organized stuff, I felt like I had to start providing value. And as soon as I started feeling like I needed to provide value, I started like researching. It's like I was putting myself into a course, and I had to take the test. And the test was having something new every other week. Um, and that's what we did. You know, it was during COVID. We had virtual meetups. My wife and I would be sitting in our bed talking to our friends about land, um, to the wee hours of the night. And it really propelled me. And I think it also, maybe this, you can relate to this, but it also drew on like my natural inclination to be competitive. I did
Mm.
not want anyone to show up with knowledge that I didn't already possess or have new ideas that I didn't come up with. And I was so hard headed that I would like constantly push myself just from that regard. And
Yeah,
I found
yeah.
that maybe not always the healthiest thing, but it did push me a lot early on.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Different strokes for different folks, I think. I think that you can't go wrong whenever you plug yourself into a community, right? So like regardless of what your style is, whether it's like, like you're really driven by competition, or maybe it's like a collaboration thing, or I think that you can't go wrong by plugging yourself in to communities and connecting and saying like comparing notes and sharing, right? Like
mhm,
I was very clear from the very beginning that I had my wholesale business probably about 9 years in Houston before I got into land. And so a lot of times, I was the new kid on the block when it came to the land stuff. I mean, I had done land for probably about 2 years before I started the Only Land Fans podcast. But that was a very clear decision that I made, is that like when I'm going to start this thing, I only want people that I'm like that are miles and miles and miles ahead of where I am. Like I only
mhm,
want like I want I want to be just like the dumbest person in the room when I'm
yeah,
talking to this type of business owner. And I tell you, I think part of that is just because like I want to learn. Like I'm a naturally inquisitive person. Like I love learning about other people and how other people do things. And so um I'll tell you, it leveled me up really, really fast though, because like when you surround yourself with these people that are doing like, like as a newbie land investor, I can remember thinking like, oh, 10 or 15 grand a deal, like net profit, like that's good. And then I start interviewing these people weekly, and they're like, man, I wouldn't even look at something like that's not less
yeah,
than 50, 60, 100K. Like that starts changing your paradigm really, really quickly. And so that was sort of like an unseen benefit. Like I didn't know that that was going to be the case. I am just humbled every single time I get on one of these interviews with someone, because it's like they're so generous and they're so giving with their information. So I don't try to compete with any of them, because I'm like, there's lots of stuff for me to learn, for all of us to learn from each other. And so that's kind of how I go into it. And I think having that like inquisitive sort of spirit, like I'm always trying to learn, I think that um, translates over to the podcast. So like the questions, that type of thing that I ask, kind of digging into their business, it's because I want to know like all of the nooks and crannies, and so
yeah.
that has helped shape how the podcast has developed over time as well.
Yeah, you're just getting in their minds, right? I mean, that's the most
Yeah.
beautiful part about whenever you sit and interview somebody is you're like, all right, tell me what's in that nice little brain of yours.
That's right. That's
Um,
right.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm always trying to harvest some of the best little details and nuggets. And really, that's one of the reasons that. So I've listened to a lot of different podcasts, and yours is the only one that I come back to regularly in our little land investing niche, because I actually learn stuff. And I'm not saying I'm the best or anything, but I've been around for a few years. So I'm usually pretty surprised when I'm encountering a new idea. And like going back to what you on the last podcast I listened to, like that realtor was talking about getting an appraisal instead of on 500 acres on 100 acres. Like, okay, go to the appraiser and get that. And I was like, that's such a no brainer. I'm immediately implementing that in one of my subdivisions. It's like, okay, well, why don't I just go get, and I'm like, all right, why don't I go get appraisal before we sell properties? Like, this is a new subdivision. We can establish the market ahead of time and show people an appraisal right, before we're even listing it. So it's like, I don't know. You hear a nugget and you can immediately, input it into your company and make a pretty serious change. I mean, that was a big deal for us.
Yeah, I love hearing
Um,
that. I love hearing that you got that from the show. You know, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but um, I will tell you, I am not a huge listener of podcasts. And I know that shocks a lot of people when I say that because it's like you have a podcast and they're like, yeah, I do. But I like to listen to different things. I like to hear different perspectives, but to say like, like religiously listen to one particular podcast. I don't really do that because I like to try to keep my approach like uniquely mine. Like one of the things that I realized like early on in the development of the show is that when I started like looking at all of these different podcasters and different styles, like I noticed I had a temptation to say, "Oh, I really like that. I'm going to borrow it." And then it didn't really necessarily feel like authentic to me. And so
mhm,
I'm very careful. And then you talk to a lot of content creators and you'll hear this same thing come up is like, yes, you do have to consume content just so you can kind of know what's going on and you get a lay of the land. But there is a line where you want to be careful to not consume too much of that content because then it will start shaping your expression, right?
yeah,
And so I try to keep a balance of that, but bringing other people on that are like land adjacent or land industry adjacent, I think is really important because coming from a wholesale house background, like there are tons of stuff that those house wholesalers did that I was in competition with that I brought over to the land space that not very many other land people were doing because that's not how it was quote unquote done in the land space, and it gave me a competitive advantage in certain markets. And so I think that there's always something to be able to borrow. How do we reinvent what we do? How do we innovate? I think it's from borrowing from lots of different industries. And so there's lots of different stuff that I will borrow. I know you as a marketer, I'm sure,
yeah.
are looking at all types of other, marketing niches that can help to inform what you do. But I think that's really important. I think it's important to get as many perspectives as possible.
Yeah, and I think you need to also have that. There's a certain clarity you do lose the more you're just like consuming other people's stuff.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important for I think just each individual to sit down and have you know intentional moments of reflection. So whether that's journaling or for me, it's very introspective with meditation and journaling, and or just walks, like long walks with music, and like all of a sudden, I'll go a mile, 2 miles, and start churning, and my brain will just start like throwing up these huge ideas. Um, I've gotten so much value just from going on walks and paying attention to myself. So I'm 100% there with you, but we gotta keep going, man. Oh my goodness, we got
Yeah.
questions
Good
ahead of you.
stuff. Good stuff.
Um, okay, I don't want to skip this one. With one of the things that really I found compelling about your brand was just your logo, right? It's your name, it's your logo, it's your brand itself. So Only Land Fans, I really was capturing and kind of like timed well and everything else. So one of the questions I get a lot from new land investors, I also do like coaching for other business owners and things like that. And a lot of it comes down to brand, and not being intentional about branding when you start. And this is kind of a big issue in our land space right now. We talked about it yesterday, but if you're just starting a land business and that's the whole definition, and then you just try to go think of whatever, some sort of like catchy land name that doesn't actually reflect any general purpose or sentiment to your business, it gets lost. So maybe just give us a few notes or thoughts or comments on branding in general, and how that plays a role in your business, your land business, and your podcast business.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, you mentioned in my bio, I have a pretty unique set of skill sets because I come from lots of different areas. I have a public relations background. I did work in public relations. I have a degree in that. That gave me a whole skill set of, understanding like corporate branding and how we put those things together. So, like the fundamentals, if you were to take like branding courses, what is color theory? What does the name mean? I think that in order to to put together a solid brand for your business, I always like to, I'm going to borrow a page out of your book, begin with the end in mind here, right?
Yeah.
So, who is your customer? I think that a lot of times it's easy in the land space to forget about the fact that A, we're dealing with people and it's not just transactions. And so what are we trying to do when we collaborate with those people on the customer, buy side, when we're buying property from people, that's a customer set. What's their, psychography of those people? What are their desires and what are their wants and what are their pain points? And you also have the seller side, or where you're selling to end buyers, like they have their own set of psychological traits and desires and stuff. So we're dealing with two different sets of customers. And so it's not very often that I hear people talking in the land business about the fact that the people that they do business with is a customer set, when in actuality, it 100% is. Like they are
Yeah.
customers and they have a customer experience. And so I always like to think about what is the experience that I want my customer to have before I even, start developing what is the mission of the company and everything else. What is the customer experience that I want them to have? So for me, when developing my personal land business brand, I knew that I wanted to do deals in Texas. That was something that was just, I'm here in Texas. I want to be able to go out to a lot of the lots. I know that there's tons of property here. I'm a licensed agent, so I have access to the MLS here. So it's just, lots of different things that this is why I chose this market. From there, it was, well, what's going to resonate with some of these sellers? Who are my sellers? They're typically, elderly people. They're people that have owned the property for longer than 8 to 10 years, things like that. And so I realized that piece of what's going to resonate with them is something that is tied to like culture and makes it significant to like their geographic location. In Texas, everyone knows Longhorn, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like, you hear Longhorn, you're a Texan, you automatically are going to think Texas. And so that's
Yep.
kind of how I started piecing, that sort of brand story for my own land company together. Of course, colors go into that. What do you want it to feel like? Do you want them to, because colors kind of, I mean, this could be a whole masterclass in color theory, but different colors evoke different things. And so I wanted it to feel like a solid, earthy, like we are salt of the earth kind of people. And so I decided on, the colors that I decided on, which are the hunter green and the rust orange, kind of taking a note from the UT page. But I think it's really important to think about who are the people that you're trying to work with and collaborate with, and what's going to resonate with them. Also, I think that considering like your personal mission and vision and plan for your company, what is it that you're trying to do? What is it that, um, what if there was a color that defined you, what would that be? What would the tone be? If you had to, take your entire experience of who you are as a person or who you are as a business owner and distill it down into a color, what would that be? Like most people, if you ask them that question, they're like, I have no clue. That right. So
Yeah.
start looking at those kinds of things. And so just from an artistic design standpoint, I think it's really important to be really aware of all of those things. And I think your question was originally about only land fans and how I came up with that. Um, you know, honestly, I tell the story a lot, but it was when I was thinking about creating the community, I wanted to create a land community. So I started with land. And so this is kind of like the brand story of this. I started thinking, I was like, okay, this is going to be about land. And when I was writing who this community was for, like I didn't want to alienate anyone. I didn't want it to be just land flippers or just land developers. I wanted it to be for fans of all things land. And then I started just like I was just looking at it and it's like land fans, land fans. I want only fans of land. And then it just kind of like clicked and I was like only land fans, only. And so once I kind of came to that conclusion, I was like, oh my gosh, there's an OnlyFans connection here because that's like a really culturally relevant brand right now. And so I think we can kind of do some tongue-in-cheek play with that. And so once I decided on that, that's what developed that's what helped to design the brand, the actual logo, and that actually colors a lot of our tone and the emails and the copy that we put out and things like that. It's kind of like a little tongue-in-cheek, wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of thing, in terms of like the brand tone and the style of what we put out. So I know it's probably a really long question. I there's lots of ways to get into that, but I hope that answers your question.
No, I think that's perfect. That's what I kind of wanted. I was like, all right, what was literally going on in your head when you're putting this together? Because I think I've talked to a bunch of people that seem to not have any of that. Like it seems like it should be obvious or something, but it's not. I mean, to a lot of people that are getting into this business, I mean, that's maybe sort of loosely what I did when I started. I was like, well, I have a company. It's going to be a land company. I need to have land in the name. I want it to be like about buying. Okay, and it ended up being I want good land. So then I started looking up synonyms, and prime land exchange just kind of came out of it. I don't think it's exceptional, in any way, but the Land Fixer podcast was very intentional. It was like, all right, well, I want my audience to see me as someone who knows pretty much everything about land. So if you have a land issue, I can fix it, right? Whether it's you have land you need to sell, or you need to learn about land, or whatever it might be, um, I probably have a tool for you. So I mean, that's a big deal to have someone to kind of explain it for you and help it make sense, and how, especially when you're new to everything and you're so confused, or maybe just overexcited about all the information laid out in front of you, and everybody tells you you're going to get rich overnight, and you just feel like you have to move, move, move. Well, you can make some poor decisions
Yeah,
that are
yeah.
fundamental just by being in a rush or not taking the time. So
Yeah, that's
I
a really good point. That's a really good point, Logan. I think ultimately, like if I had to say anything to brand new people who are like, okay, because I mean, there are people with doctorates in the art of branding, and it's like, do you have to, go that deep when you're first forming a company? Absolutely not. But I definitely think for new people, the biggest takeaway is number one, that brand matters. It's
Mhm.
extremely important. And it doesn't matter whether you're a land person, whether you're just a business owner, like having your business branded, but also your personal brand, because your business is going to fit within that personal brand. Who are you as a person?
Mhm.
And have you thought about how you're communicating that to the world, especially in today's like digital age? It's so important. But the second thing is just how intentional are you being? You don't have to have like every single step laid out, but is there intentionality behind why you choose it? And can you communicate that at a pretty in-depth level in a relatively short matter of time, right? So
Yeah.
like I see a lot of people kind of like hyphenating different words, like, oh, I'm gonna borrow like my grandmother's part of her name, and we're gonna splice that together with like, my first pet growing up, and it's just a weird word that doesn't make sense to anyone else but you. I think that there's some challenges in that. So just in terms of being intentional, I look at everything that we put out. Every single thing that we put out has it been touched by design? Has there been some type of intentionality behind it, right? Every
Yeah.
caption, every emoji that we choose, it all means something. And so I think if you just start as a brand new person with, okay, what am I trying to say? What do I know? You don't have to know it all, but what am I trying to say? And am I at least trying to say it with what I put out? Like, and the fact that it all matters. It all matters. Like to me, my team will tell you, I say this all the time. If anything matters, everything matters. Every detail matters, and you have to be looking at it like that.
Yeah, and I think you do get that. Like that is apparent by what you put out. So I commend you. You do a better job than I do. Um, okay, well, let's move on. I want to keep digging there, but let's move
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
further. All right, debating which question to ask next. Okay, we're gonna be brief on the first one. You're an incredible networker. This is something that I also kind of pride myself on, is having a lot of good people in my phone. I have somebody for everything. Can you give maybe some cliff notes on how you build a network? how you get people to actually want to answer your phone call, when it comes in. Anything you have around networking, because that's been fundamental to my success for sure.
Yeah, it's huge. I think that first of all, being intentional again is super important. You know, um, is there a list of people in any industry that you move into, or maybe it's a geographic location or whatever, but who are your top 10 people that like dream wise you would love to have in your phone, or that you would love to collaborate with, that you'd love to do something with, and then just work backwards from that and say, okay, well, who knows that person? Or how can I get in the same room with that person? Whether it's a mastermind, whether it's a virtual meetup, whether it's having a podcast and inviting that person on, right? Like that's huge. And so, from a networking standpoint, I think that being intentional with who you want to meet, and maybe it's not even, a name, but maybe it's a profile. Like I want to meet seven-figure land flippers, right?
Right.
Well, then how do you build that? Like everything that I do, if I'm looking to network, let's say it's for seven-figure land flippers, I'm going where those people are. I'm going to the masterminds, I'm going to the meetups, I'm going to the Facebook groups. LinkedIn is huge. If you're doing like a lot of professional networking, lots of big time movers and shakers on LinkedIn versus like TikTok, right?
Yeah.
Um, got to kind of have to know the audience. But I think that one of the most important things is sort of this law of reciprocity. Alex Hormozy talks a lot about this, but it's always giving some type of value first before you make any type of ask. And I always look at that in terms of like, what kind of value can I give to any single person that I meet, especially from a networking perspective? What value can I bring to you just to start our relationship?
Yeah.
and and that will always be the basis of every connection that I make. It's how can we collaborate, how can I bring value, and the caveat, or maybe not caveat, but the add-on to that is, that's not new information. You hear Gary Vee talk about that, Alex Hormozy talks about it. But the worst thing, in my opinion, is to go to someone that you want to bring value and say, hey, how can I bring value to you? Like, that's so, like, let me use your brain for you to tell me how I can connect with you. Like, to me, that's a little bit of cheating. So I like to research people. I like to see like what are they doing? Like what type of project are they working on and how can I bring value? And I may bring three or four different ideas and really flesh them out. And then come to that person and say, hey, listen, I've been thinking about this. I love the work that you've been doing with this. I'd love to know if I could do X, Y, or Z for you, or what connections or resources are you looking for? I think that that's a really important question to ask, especially once you start connecting with enough people that you have a network, like asking other people, what connection or resource are you looking for? Because just
Mhm.
connecting someone could be a huge value, right? So that's what I would say to sort of the cliff notes to networking.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's perfect. You kind of get to a point when you're first starting off, you're like, okay, I need to start meeting people. And there's not a lot of value that I think you can bring other than what you're probably already putting into your business, which is blood, sweat, and tears. I think you get to a certain point where you actually have a lot of value. And, we talked about this last night, but once a quarter, I just go on Facebook groups and say, hey, call me with any land problems. And I tell people 15 minutes. It always ends up being like 30 minutes per call, but I'll have calls with like 30, 40 people.
I
And
love that.
it's awesome, man. I feel like I've really helped a lot. Actually, I had one deal recently. I'll gloat on myself a little bit. Last time I did it, actually 2 times ago I did it. I had one person that called me and said they're dealing with this complicated issue on a property in Ohio. I helped solve it for them. They came to me for funding later. We funded it, closed it, and that person walked with their first six-figure profit on a land deal.
Love
It was one
that.
of the best. Yeah, it was incredible. Like that, life changed. I couldn't say that
Yeah.
I really did much of anything. I gave a little bit of advice that a lot of other people could have given that person, but the fact that I was able to pick up the phone and we did have a funding company in place, that was a substantial benefit for that individual.
Yeah, that's
Um,
incredible. Love it.
yeah. So I think it is also incumbent once you reach a certain point of success to just maybe not always focus on the next level, but start focusing backwards. Like I don't know, like how would you call it? Like charitable networking. Like how can I give now? Okay, I've received a whole bunch up to this point. I think especially in the land space, this is something that is really true about our industry. Is people are pretty wide open about almost anything.
Yeah.
Um, I've just DM'd people that I consider very successful in our industry in the past and been like, help me with this, and they will literally just pull themselves aside. And these are same people that are charging 10 grand for like educational services, but they'll still carve out 5-10 minutes to help you with a specific deal. And I think it's incumbent upon us to just keep giving back. And you do that just with the podcast itself. It's much free content, but um, yeah, I don't know. Networking is huge. And that's always the first thing I tell people when they're new to the industry. They ask me about courses and whatever else, but I just say, go surround yourself with winners, whatever you can do. Um, just try to identify people that are hungry, not starving. That's kind of the class that you want to hang
That's
out
good.
with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really, really good. Yeah, because I mean, every single person that you're going to meet in this industry is going to be able to work with you in some kind of way. So whether it's, at the very bare minimum, they are bringing a lead to you that they don't know what to do with the next, like what the next step is with this lead. Their only contribution may be just bringing a lead. There may
Yeah.
be a money partner, there may be a JV partner, there may be someone that you can team up with that's doing a massive deal. And so I think that there's always ways to like connect with people and collaborate. Like I've used that word several times already, but like if you look at every situation that you go into is like, how can I work with someone?
Mhm.
Like there are so many amazing doors that are going to open up.
Yeah, 100%. Um, All right, let's get into the last question, and
Yeah.
this one's kind of a big one. It could be a hot topic depending on who's listening. But a lot of folks are always asking me. One of the first questions is, okay, where do you go for your education, right? Um,
Mm.
so we'll just go ahead and say that your school program is where people should be going, right? If they're looking to get into land. But
Yeah,
tell me,
yeah.
what do you think about in general, right? I've kind of seen this trend where I was coming in, the gurus and educators and things like that were still teaching something that seemed to be very successful, and people were taking off. I was having success, and I don't know how much of that was actually what they were teaching or just the times. Like I came in during the COVID eras, where you're just making money hand over fist. You could be a complete idiot like I was and still do fine. But what's it
Yeah.
like today? I mean, I feel like educating about land today is so difficult because you can speak very broadly, but what's making people successfully is all now, in my opinion, down to the minutia.
Yeah.
Um, what separates very successful land investors from people that are maybe less successful, or yeah, I'll just say less successful, whatever, usually comes down to like paying attention to all those details. The things that you're really good at. So how could people educate that with without being like singularly focused on individuals? So I don't know. There's a few questions there. Tell me about what you think about education and a little bit about your school program.
Yeah, so this topic is really near and dear to my heart because I am originally like my very first foray into anything professional. Like my career was I was a music teacher. I was a band director. And so education, I've gone through lots and lots and lots of education training, just how to be a better teacher, right? I have degrees
Mm-hmm.
in education. So education is I have a soft spot in my heart for that for sure. The thing that I am gathering from seeing different people in the community. A lot of people have asked me, "Hey, what's your favorite education program and where should I go for this?" This is what I'll say. I think that everything works if you work it. And I that might be a controversial statement where people are like, "Oh, well, why are you going to do desert squares and or why are you going to do just subdivides or why are you get like
Yeah.
ultimately it comes down to what do you want your business model to look like and what do you want like what's your definition of success? I talk to a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people that they don't like they're not looking to like leave their corporate job. They just want like an additional 10 grand a month in land. Or I talk to people that are like, hey, listen, I'm a high income earner and I'm ready to flip the script and completely retire myself. And now I want to make $1 million in land.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those things are perfectly fine. I think you have to decide for yourself, like, what is success? because success doesn't always mean more money, right? It's the what lifestyle, like, some people, I know some people that are like, hey, listen, if I can make 10 grand a month, like with 1 hour of time a week, like that is, I'm good all day. That's my business model. They're not
Yeah.
looking to build an empire, right?
Yep.
And that is completely valid. So the first thing that I'd say is there are so many different educators out there that offer lots of different business models, lots of different focuses. So I think that it's really important for you to get super clear on what you want to achieve. Like, what is your vision for your business? That's step one. The second thing is, we've all had different teachers throughout our lifetimes, like in school, where you just really gel with one person's delivery and are you're really turned off by another teacher's delivery. So I think that that plays a really big role. I know people that have gone through every single program that you can think of. Like if you said, "Hey, who who does, give me
Yeah.
connect me with someone that's gone through that program." I could give you probably two people, one person that like completely crushed it, and another person that absolutely hated it, didn't make a dime.
Mhm.
So that's to say that I think that it's really important for you to like understand that like the personality really
Mhm.
matters in terms of like what's your learning style. Some programs are not very hands-on and it's like asynchronous and that's cool. Some other programs are like I'm going to hold your hand and do it. So there's lots of different elements that go into what makes a program successful and what if it's going to be successful for you. One of the things that I get a lot of is we see this on social media all the time. Like there's now like this marketing trend to like bash gurus where it's like,
I've been seeing this. Yeah.
it's crazy and it's like, have your guru pull out his last HUD statement and show you this and blah 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 and like I understand that. I get that it's a, it is a marketing trend, but on the other hand, you know, I think that there's something to be said. There's value in working with a mentor, working with someone who has at least had some degree of success in doing the thing that you want to do, right? So is it absolutely necessary to join a coaching program or an education program? No. There's so much free information out there, but you know, I think that the same can be said for any industry. Like you don't need a nutritionist or a dietitian to help you to lose weight, or you don't need a fitness trainer to help you to get in shape. All of that information is already online for
Yep.
free. Like you can go to YouTube University and get the body of your dreams. But usually it's not an information issue, it's an implementation issue. And I think that's where a lot of these coaching programs can really help. Um, school, that was a community that I created that, I was getting tons of questions from people of like, hey, what contract template should I use? Or how do I do a Facebook marketplace ad? Or, how do I start up a business? What does my acquisitions funnel need to look like? So basically what I just did with that platform was I just took every resource that if someone asked me a question, I created a resource around it. And then I put that into a community and it's like, listen, it's a very, very low ticket thing. It's just like, it's the entry fee is just enough for you to have a little bit of skin in the game so you actually do something with the information and to pay the team that I have to keep that up and
Do
running.
it. Yeah.
And so um there's that component. I also have a coaching program. I have a personal coaching program that I coach land investors on how to build systems and processes in their business. It's not, I don't like widely advertise it because it's extremely exclusive. I like to keep it small because my style of teaching is I'm very hands-on to do those deals with individuals and build systems and processes along the way. I had a really good conversation with Logan Fulmer on the podcast about um, what we see a lot is that there are people that have what he calls deal shops, where it's you do a little bit of marketing to find a deal and then you stop your marketing and move on to the dispo of that deal.
Yep.
And once you dispo that, you stop the dispo stuff, and then now you start the TC stuff. And so you don't have a system or a process. And his wording was, that's a deal shop, it's not a business. And so,
Mhm.
like in my coaching program, I focus just on taking what you already have and making systems and processes out of it. This is not like, hey, let me teach you my method for subdividing, right? That's a very different skill set. So I share all of that to say that if you want to do this for free, there are many ways to do that. If you want to pay, a coach or a mentor, there are some phenomenal resources out there. I personally fall in the camp of, when I started wholesaling, I did everything on my own, and it took me 3 years to do my first deal. The minute I hooked up with a coach and that person held my hand and showed me like just the value of hearing that person pick up the phone and talk to a seller, like I was able to do 3 deals in the first month, right? And so it drastically changed the trajectory of my business. And so I think that there's so much value in just investing in education, right? And that's the other piece, is that it's important to invest. Like you're investing in yourself and in your business with education. And if
Yep.
you were thinking of this as like oh, I'm not going to pay someone a couple of $1,000s to learn what I can learn for free, then I think that you might want to just kind of do an inventory on what your mission and what your values are as a business owner, because that's a different hat altogether, right? Like
Yeah.
this, it's an investment. So I don't know if that answers your question, because that's a really big question. That's a really big
Yeah.
question. There's lots of things that go into that, but I am such a huge fan of education, and I'll tell you, there are people like I have colleagues not in the land space, but in the real estate investment space that will charge $100,000 for a one-on-one 6 month coaching program, and the people that they sell to are making, multiple times that amount in that 6 months, and that's the best 100K that they've ever spent. And so, I think that it's a mindset in terms of like, okay, what is it that you're actually investing? And most of the time, like I talk to other coaches about this, and they'll say, "Man, I had this conversation the other day. Someone asked me a question." And for the most part, like what you mentioned, like you can reach out to just about anyone in the land space and ask a
Yeah.
question and answer it, right?
Yep.
Um, but every now and then we get these people that are like, well, why couldn't you just coach me for free? And then when I close my deal, I'll pay you. And it's
Yep.
the issue with that, I think, and I've learned this the hard way, because I used to spend hours a week just get like working one-on-one with people, and they like 99% of them did nothing with it. Did nothing
Mhm.
with it. Why? Because they didn't have skin in the game. Like if they didn't do anything with it, there was no loss to them,
Yep.
right? And so I think that the investment is less about these people that are doing coaching, for the most part, they don't need that money. They don't need the coaching fees, right? They're doing it as sort of like a service, but the reason why they have to charge is because that's more for the student than it is for them, because it's a promise, it's a skin in the game kind of a thing, to make sure that you're holding yourself accountable. Hey, I put a couple grand on this. I need to take action and do something with it,
Yeah, it
right?
is a really odd dynamic. I've done the same sort of thing. I have done coaching here and there. I've never made it a deal. And so because of that, I've never had like, oh, here's my price point and here's what you get. So
Yeah,
I've done like free coaching, and those people were terrible,
yeah,
terrible, because they like
absolutely.
they were always calling me, expecting me to reply at all hours of the night, and never did anything. Like, and I
Yeah,
was always just so frustrated because I tried to give them as much or more knowledge than other people that I actually charged money for.
yeah.
Um, so then
Did you
people
have a
would come to me.
coach? Did you
So
have a coach?
I did Lane Geek Flight School 6 years
Okay,
ago. No, I
cool.
never had a one-on-one coach.
Got it.
Um, and yeah, so I've done a bunch of stuff, and the frustrating part is like it always comes down to the same thing. It's like you just kind of watch them not try at some point, and I'm like, I don't know, this isn't me. I'll do it every once in a while if someone really pushes me to do it, but I could be a bad educator, so I just don't dabble with it. So I have mad respect for people that can do it and can do a good job of it. Because the other
Yeah.
thing that I've run into a lot is people who are like, I spent $40,000 on educating with, this person or that person and just never did a deal. And I'm always like, well, that's probably a mirror issue. You need to go talk to yourself about that because you
Yeah,
can get
I
this
think
information for free, like you said.
absolutely. Coming, to talk a little bit about what you just said, I think that, like, yeah, there are people, and that's the crazy thing, that's the wild thing about it, is that there are people that will pay 40 grand for a coaching program and do nothing.
Hmm.
And I think it's like, I don't know like what I've kind of settled on is the fact that them paying the money makes them feel like they've done something
Right.
and they should then by proxy be successful, right?
Hmm.
When actually paying the money is really just a matter of like showing to yourself that you are invested in this, and then you have to go and take the action,
Yeah.
right? Um, but also to your point, there are people like education is a skill. Like teaching people is a skill, right? Like there's a reason why teachers like in our school systems and stuff have to be certified because it's a skill set to be able to create a curriculum
Yeah.
and teach a person a curriculum in a way that they understand it and that they're successful, right? And so I think that coaches get a really bad rap sometimes, but also I think that it's like just because you've done a thing doesn't necessarily mean that you can
Do you know
teach
how to
someone
teach
how
it?
to do
Yeah.
it. Like we've all been through school. You're not yet certified to go and teach a class just because you've
Yeah.
been in a classroom before. So I think that there are lots of it's a really nuanced issue like you mentioned
Hmm.
earlier, but um I will forever and always invest in coaching for like whatever brand, like whatever business I have. Like I have
Hmm.
coaches and mentors that are paid memberships in almost every area of my life. And just because I value being able to leverage that person's time and experience, I'm not someone that needs like a huge amount of accountability because I hold myself accountable a lot. Um, but just being able to be in that person's like direct circle of influence, like my gosh, like I would pay over and over and over again for that because it's really catapulted so many of my businesses.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, you nailed it on the head. I think it really comes down to like some people are meant to be business owners. I like where you said like
Yeah.
when you think about people spending money, and it makes them feel like they're doing something. If I'm having a
Yeah.
lazy weekend and I have a project to work on at home, like sometimes I'll go to the store and buy a tool and be like, "Oh yeah, I did something."
Yeah,
But
man.
did I use
Yeah.
the tool? No,
Yeah,
I hung around Home Depot
absolutely.
for an hour. So
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. So I have a friend of mine who is in the education space around Facebook ads, and he runs a pretty like high volume and high ticket coaching program. And he's like, you will not believe the number of people that are just like clamoring to give their money and then they do nothing. And come to find out, like those same people like do that multiple times. So like they'll go to multiple programs, spend money because it makes them feel like they're doing something,
yeah,
and then they don't do anything with it, right? And it's wild because it's this like this exchange of money makes you feel like you're taking action.
yeah,
Like I like to call it like a rocking horse, right? Like you can rock on a horse all day long, you'll have tons of motion, but you will not progress an inch further if you don't have, if you don't take that horse off of its rocker kind of thing. So it's fascinating. It's interesting how the mind works for sure.
yeah. You can dig into that psyche all day. All right,
Yeah, yeah.
Kendall, we've done good here tonight. I think. I'm pretty happy. My kids are probably going to storm in here and cause ruckus here any moment. So I think let's wrap it.
Love it.
Anything you want to close with or plug at the very end here?
Well, I just want to thank you so much for having me on, and it's been an absolute pleasure. It's always a blast to get to talk about these topics, especially in the
Yeah.
land space around marketing and stuff. The question that I have for you
Mhm.
is, what are you looking for in your business right now? How can people listening, uh, you know, connect with you and collaborate with you in a way that brings you value?
Yeah. What we're really looking for right now is people who have developable land that they want to
Hmm.
partner with us to do the subdivision and work on.
Nice.
That's a big deal for us right now because there's a lot of people that are still trying to get top value retail for their property, but the demand is dropping. So the way that you can still get that retail value for your property is by working with someone like me that can add value to that property through subdivision or entitlement or any number of forced appreciation strategies. And that allows us to just flex the muscle that we've worked so hard to get, as opposed to half my life being capital raising,
Yeah.
which is fine. I don't cry about it. It's kind of fun to go raise a bunch of capital, but at the same time, like that is a huge time suck and doesn't actually add a whole lot of value to anything. So I'd rather be doing the value and not raising the capital. So if I can work with someone who's willing to bring the land and make more money, that's a pretty sweet situation.
That's so good. And I'm sure it's so much faster too, because you just collaborate with
Yes.
them and you're like, okay, great, we're partners on this. I'm gonna go do the legwork. You let me do what I need to do with the land, and we all get paid at the end.
Yep. Yep.
I love
Exactly.
that. I love that.
Cool. Well, thank you
Awesome.
again, Kendall. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks
it,
so much.
folks. Just a reminder, if you need to buy or sell land, go to primelandexchange.com. Check me out at thelandfixer.com. If you need funding, go to landpartnerfunding.com. All right, folks. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Cheers.